Imagine getting a call that shatters your world, a call that tells you your child has been violated and the very system you swore to uphold is siding with the monster. That's exactly where I found myself, and in that moment, I knew someone was going to pay. For 23 years, I'd been Lucius David, Captain David, a cop who'd seen humanity at its worst. Before that, 3 tours in Afghanistan taught me about violence. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares a man for the bureaucratic nightmare of a divorce, especially when your ex-wife remarries a man who smiles too much and drinks too little. Always a bad sign, in my experience. I was 46, carrying my authority with the quiet ease of a man who'd earned every stripe. My uniform was always immaculate, my bearing military straight. But my eyes, gray as gunmetal, held a warm reserve for exactly 3 people. My son, Blake, my partner of 15 years, and my late mother. It was a typical afternoon. I was in my office, trying to make sense of incident reports. Gang activity was spiking. 2 of my best detectives were out on paternity leave. My officer, Sandy Ollie, poked her head in, reminded me about the mayor's office and the community outreach program. Then she mentioned my ex-wife, Carmela. Said something about Blake's football game Saturday. She sounded tense. My jaw tightened. Carmela always sounded tense these days, especially since she'd married Gwa Edwards 2 years ago. The man was a successful contractor. Too successful, I always thought. Nobody built that fast and that profitably without cutting corners somewhere. I'll handle it, I told Ollie, and picked up my personal phone. 3 missed calls from Carmela, all within the last hour. Before I could dial back, my phone rang again. Blake, my son. Hey, champ, you okay? I felt my shoulders ease, but only for a second. Dad, yeah, I'm fine. Just can we talk? Not on the phone. Blake was 16, all built like me, but with his mother's dark eyes. He'd been distant lately, and I'd chalked it up to teenage chaos. But something in his voice, a raw edge I hadn't heard before, triggered that instinct that had kept me alive in Helmand Province. I can pick you up in 20. Usual spot. No, Blake's voice dropped. Can you meet me at Uncle Byron's garage instead? I don't want to be home right now. My brother, Byron, was the only mechanic in the city who could resurrect a '67 Mustang from a pile of rust and regret. Blake spent countless afternoons there. It was his sanctuary. I'm on my way, I said, and was out the door. My second-in-command, Lieutenant Caldwell, just nodded as I told him I'd be out for an hour. He knew that look. The garage sat in an industrial area that gentrification had somehow missed. I pulled up to find Blake sitting on the hood of a Chevelle, shoulders hunched, staring at his phone. Blake, I said, my voice softer than I usually allowed it to be. He looked up, and that's when I saw it. A purple shadow blooming under his left eye, half hidden by carefully arranged hair. Don't freak out, he slid off the hood, hands raised. It's not as bad as it looks. My training kicked in before my rage. I approached slowly, gently turned his face to the light. The bruise was fresh, maybe 3-4 hours old. There were finger marks on his upper arm, barely visible under his sleeve. Son, I asked, my voice a low rumble. Who did this to you? His eyes filled with tears, but he was too proud to let them fall. We got into an argument about the game Saturday. I talked back and he grabbed me, shoved me against the wall. Said I was disrespectful, that mom lets me get away with murder, that someone needed to teach me discipline. His voice cracked. I pushed him back just once and he lost it. My blood temperature dropped to somewhere near absolute 0. This was what the old guys called combat calm, the crystalline clarity that comes right before hell breaks loose. Where's your mother? She was at her sister's. She doesn't know yet. He told me if I said anything, he'd make sure I never saw you again. That he has friends in family court. That he could prove you're an unfit parent because you're never around. I pulled my son in my arms, felt him shake against my chest. Did you hit him back? No, I left, grabbed my bike, and came here. Blake pulled away, swiping at his eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have provoked him. I know Mom's happy with him, and I don't want to mess that up. Stop. I gripped his shoulders, making sure he looked me in the eye. You did nothing wrong. A grown man put his hands on you. That's assault. That's unacceptable. My voice was firm, leaving no room for doubt. I'll handle your mother. Right now, I need you to do exactly what I say. We're going to the hospital, getting you checked out. Then we're documenting everything. Blake nodded, and I saw the trust in his eyes. That absolute faith that Dad would fix this. Dad would make it right. It was a weight I'd carried since the day he was born and one I'd carry until my last breath. What I didn't tell my son was that Edwards had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because there were rules in my world, laws I upheld, codes I lived by. But there was one rule that superseded everything else. You don't touch my son. Carmela Edwards, formerly Carmela David, stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of her sister's house. She tried to convince herself that the tightness in her chest was just anxiety about Blake's upcoming football game. She'd been on edge all day, ever since the argument at breakfast between Blake and Gua. You okay in there? Her sister, Elena, called through the door. Yeah, just give me a minute. She splashed cold water on her face. At 43, Carmela had aged gracefully, thanks to yoga, expensive skincare, and the comfortable life Gua provided. She'd married him because he was everything I wasn't, present, attentive, financially stable without the constant threat of a bullet ending it all. No more 3 a.m. calls about officer-involved shootings. No more waiting up, wondering if today was the day she'd become a widow. But lately, Gua had been different. Shorter temper, drinking more, working later hours. And his relationship with Blake had deteriorated from cool to hostile over the past 6 months. Her phone buzzed. My number. She almost didn't answer, but guilt and habit made her thumb swipe right. Carmela, where are you? I asked, my voice tight. At Elena's. Why? What's wrong? She heard it immediately. That tone I used when I was barely restraining my fury. When did you last see Blake? Her heart stopped. This morning, around 7:30. Why, Lucius? What happened? Your husband happened. The way I said husband made her stomach drop. What are you talking about? We'll put his hands on our son. Blake has bruises, Carmela. On his face, his arms. Do you want to tell me how long this has been going on? The bathroom tilted. That's no. Ghoul wouldn't. Blake must have gotten in a fight at school. Blake told me everything. And before you accuse our son of lying, I'm looking at the evidence right now. We're at County Memorial. You should get here. I hung up. Carmela stared. At the phone, her perfect world cracking like a windshield after a stone strike. Who had been frustrated with Blake, yes. The boy could be difficult, moody, disrespectful. But physical violence? That wasn't the man she'd married. That wasn't the man who brought her coffee in bed every Sunday, who'd renovated their kitchen with his own hands, who'd promised to give her the stability I never could. She burst out of the bathroom. I need to go. It's Blake. The drive to County Memorial took 15 minutes that felt like hours. She tried calling with 3 times, straight to voicemail. When she finally reached the emergency room, she found me in the waiting area, still in uniform, radiating a controlled intensity that had once made her feel safe and now just made her feel small. Where is he? She asked, her voice trembling. Getting x-rays. The doctor wants to rule out a fractured orbital bone. I stood, and she was reminded viscerally of how physically imposing I was. 6'2", 200 pounds of coiled muscle and barely suppressed violence. You want to explain to me how you didn't notice your husband was abusing our son? Don't. Carmela's voice shook. Don't you dare make this sound like I knew. If Blake was having problems, he should have told me. He tried. 3 weeks ago. Remember when he asked to spend weekdays with me and only weekends at your place? You told him he was being dramatic, that he needed to adjust. She had said that. The memory made her nauseous. Mrs. Edwards, a nurse, appeared. Your son is ready to see you. Carmela rushed past me, past the judgment in my eyes, and found Blake in a curtained examination area. The bruise looked worse under fluorescent lighting, angry purple spreading from his cheekbone to his eye socket. But it was the defeated slump of his shoulders that broke her heart. Baby, she whispered. Mom. Blake's voice was flat. Dad told you. He told me his version. I want to hear yours. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. I talked back to Gua about Saturday's game. Said I wanted a dad there, not him. He grabbed my arm, shoved me into the wall, told me I was an ungrateful punk. I pushed him away. He punched me. Blake finally looked at her. That's my version. Are you going to believe me? Or are you going to make excuses for him like you always do? Always, Blake. What are you talking about? The shoving, the grabbing, the names he calls me when you're not in the room. The way he goes through my phone, my backpack, controls everything I do. I've been telling you for months that something's wrong, but you don't want to see it. You're so happy to have your perfect husband in your perfect house that you don't care what he does to me. Each word was a knife. Carmela felt tears streaming down her face. Blake, I swear I didn't know. Yeah, well, now you do. The curtains swept open. I entered with a doctor, followed by a woman in a blazer with a CPS badge clipped to her belt. The social worker's presence made everything horrifyingly real. Mrs. Edwards, I'm Whitney Shaw from Child Protective Services. I need to ask you some questions about your household. The next hour was a blur of interrogation, medical reports, and the slow, agonizing realization that she'd failed her son, failed to see what was happening under her own roof, failed to protect him from a man she'd brought into their lives. When it was over, Blake was released into my custody, pending an investigation. Temporary, the social worker said, but the look I gave Carmela promised this was permanent. Carmela, I stopped her as she walked to her car. You need to decide right now what's more important, your marriage or your son, because you can't have both anymore. She watched them drive away, me and Blake in my truck, his head against the window, my hand on his shoulder. And she felt the foundations of her carefully constructed life crumble to dust. When she finally got home, the house was dark. His truck was in the driveway. She found him in his study, a glass of bourbon in hand, staring at his phone. Where's Blake? He asked without looking up. With Lucius. At the hospital. Where you put him. He looked at her, and she saw something she'd never seen before. Not remorse, not shame, but cold calculation. He told you his version. His version? Her voice rose. You hit our son in the face. Our son. Gwen laughed, bitter and sharp. He's not my son, Carmela. He made that clear today. He's Lucius's son, and he never lets me forget it. I've tried for 2 years to connect with that kid, and all I get is attitude and disrespect. So yeah, I put him in his place. That's what fathers do. You're not his father. The words came out before she could stop them. Something dangerous flickered across Gwen's face. Yeah, I'm starting to realize that. He drained his bourbon. Your ex is going to come at me for this. You know that, right? Captain Lucius David, war hero, decorated officer. He's going to try to destroy me. Maybe you deserve it. Gwen stood, and for the first time in their marriage, Carmela felt afraid. Be very careful whose side you choose here. Because if you think Lucius is going to welcome you back with open arms, you're delusional. You left him, remember? You said he was married to the job, that you couldn't live with the danger, that you deserve better. Well, this is better. This house, this life, I gave you everything you asked for. And if you throw that away over one mistake, over a punk kid who needs discipline, then you're a fool. He walked out, leaving her standing in the study, her perfect life in ruins, wondering how she'd been so blind. I had Blake settled in my apartment, a sparse 2-bedroom unit that had all the warmth of a barracks, but at least it was safe. He was on a couch, wrapped in a blanket, pretending to watch TV. At 10:03 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Instinct told me to answer. David, Captain David. Captain David, this is Sergeant Randy Miller from the West District Station. I have your son here. My blood froze. Blake was 20 feet away on the couch. What are you talking about? My son is right here. Sir, I have a Blake David, 16 years old. Claims you're his father. He was brought in about an hour ago. His stepfather filed a report. Assault, destruction of property. The kid's in interview room B, and he's asking for you. The world slowed down. I looked at Blake, then back at my phone. Sergeant Miller, I'm going to ask you one time. Describe the boy you have. About 5'11", brown hair, has a bruise on his face. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Nobody talks to my son without me present. Clear? Yes, sir. Captain, I should tell you, the stepfather is here too. Gwen Edwards. He's pretty insistent we press charges. That comeback calm descended again, cold and clarifying. I'll deal with Edwards. You just make sure my son is comfortable and has water. 20 minutes. I hung up and turned to Blake, who is now sitting up alert. What's wrong? Your stepfather just filed a false police report claiming you assaulted him. You're at the West District Station, apparently. I grabbed my jacket, my badge, my service weapon. Where did you last see Gua? This morning at the house, Dad. I swear I didn't touch him. I know. He's trying to get ahead of what happened today. Make himself the victim. I check my weapon automatically, a habit from 2 decades of doing this before every shift. Get dressed. You're coming with me. I want you visible and accounted for when I walk into that station. Dad, what are you going to do? I looked at my son, saw the fear there, the uncertainty. Blake needed to see that his father could handle this. That justice existed. That good men still won sometimes. I'm going to do what I've always done. Protect what's mine. The drive to West District took exactly 18 minutes. I used the time to make 3 calls. One to Caldwell, my second-in-command. One to Byron, my brother. And one to my lawyer, a shark named Courtney Baldwin, who'd gotten me through the divorce and owed me several favors. When we walked into the station, I made sure to stop at the front desk, made sure the duty officer logged Blake's arrival, made sure there were witnesses and timestamps. Then I walked toward the interview rooms with Blake beside me, my hand on his shoulder, projecting an authority that made officers step aside. Sergeant Randy Miller met us in the hallway. He was maybe 30, solid build, career cop written all over him. The moment he saw my uniform, his face went white. Captain David, which room is my son supposedly in, Sergeant? Interview B, sir. But I walked past him, opened the door. Empty. Just an empty room with a table, 2 chairs, and the ghost of a fabricated accusation. Interesting. My son seems to have disappeared. I turned, and Miller actually took a step back. You want to explain to me how you have a victim in custody who's also standing right next to me? Sir, I was just following procedure. Edwards came in with a report. Said his stepson attacked him, destroyed property at his home, made threats. He had photos, documentation. Photos of what? Damage he did himself? Sergeant Miller, you've been a cop long enough to recognize a setup. Where's Edwards now? Interrogation C. He's waiting to give a statement. Excellent. I'm going to need 15 minutes with him. Miller's eyes widened. Captain, I can't. You can't what? I stepped closer, dropped my voice to a register that carried command without volume. You filed a report based on false information. You attempted to process a minor without parental notification. And you're harboring a man who assaulted a child. My child. Earlier today. Now, I can make this official. Bring in internal affairs. Have your career examined under a microscope. Or you can give me 15 minutes with the man who tried to frame my son, and we can resolve this quietly. Your choice, Sergeant. Miller looked at Blake, at the bruise that was now impossible to ignore under the station's harsh lighting, and something shifted in his expression. He did that this morning. Hospital records are already filed. X-rays, doctor's statement, CPS report, all time-stamped. So when Edwards claims my son attacked him today, you can see the problem. Jesus. Miller ran a hand through his hair. Captain, I didn't know. He came in all professional, had his story straight, seemed credible. He's a contractor. He's good at building facades. I gentled my tone fractionally. You're not at fault here, Randy, but you're going to help me fix it. Take Blake to your office. Get him coffee, something to eat. I need witnesses to see him calm, cooperative, uninjured beyond what Edwards did earlier. While I have a conversation with my son's stepfather. Sir, I'm not going to assault him. I smiled. It was not a kind expression. I'm just going to ask him some questions about his construction business, his permits, his tax returns. Completely by the book. Miller hesitated, then nodded. Interview room C. He's all yours. But, Captain, I didn't hear anything. I was in my office doing paperwork. Smart man. I waited until Blake was safely in Miller's office, visible through the glass, before I walked to interrogation room C. I didn't knock, just opened the door and stepped inside, letting it close behind me with an authoritative click. Gway Edwards sat at the metal table, looking smug and confident in expensive jeans and a polo shirt that screamed successful contractor. He was maybe 40, fit for manual labor, with slick back hair and a $1,000 watch. When he saw me, that smug expression flickered. Captain David, I was hoping we could talk man-to-man about your son's behavior. Shut up. His mouth snapped closed. I walked slowly around the table, my boots loud on the linoleum. I didn't sit, Didn't move into Edwards' space, just stood there, letting the silence stretch, letting my uniform and my reputation and my barely leashed rage do the work. "You put your hands on my son," I finally said, my voice conversational. "Then you try to cover it up by filing a false report. That's assault on a minor and filing a false police report. Those are felonies, Gua. He attacked me. Blake was with me all evening. Hospital records, witnesses, timestamps. Your story falls apart under basic scrutiny." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of the station, go home, and stay away from my son. I'm filing for emergency custody, and you're not going to contest it. You're going to tell Sergeant Miller that there was a misunderstanding, that you overreacted, that you're dropping all charges. Like hell. And if you don't," I continued as if Edwards hadn't spoken, "I'm going to take a very close look at your business. Your permits, your building codes, your employee documentation. I'm going to talk to the IRS about some interesting discrepancies I've noticed in your tax returns. Yes, I've already pulled them. Perks of being a captain. I'm going to talk to your suppliers about those bulk material purchases that don't quite match your project invoices. And I'm going to make sure every building inspector in this city knows your name." His face had gone pale. "You can't." "I can. And I will. Because you made one critical error, Gua. You thought I was just a cop. But I'm not just a cop. I'm a father. And you hurt my son." I pushed off the wall, moved to the door. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Keep pushing this, and I'll destroy everything you've built. Or walk away. And maybe you get to keep your business and your freedom. Your choice." I opened the door, then paused. "Oh, and Gua, if you ever come near Blake again, I won't use my badge. I'll use my hands, and there won't be enough of you left for a closed casket. We clear." I walked out without waiting for an answer. I found Miller in his office with Blake, who was nursing a hot chocolate and looking young and vulnerable in a way that tightened my chest. "Sergeant Miller, Mr. Edwards is ready to give a statement. I believe he'll be dropping all charges and apologizing for wasting police resources." Miller looked between me and the interrogation room, then nodded slowly. "I'll go take care of that." When we were alone, Blake looked up at me. "What did you say to him?" "The truth. That he messed with the wrong family." I pulled my son into a hug, felt Blake cling to me like he had when he was 5 years old and afraid of thunderstorms. "It's over, champ. You're safe now." But even as I said it, even as Blake relaxed against me, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. Because men like Gua, Edwards didn't give up that easily. And wounds this deep took more than threats to heal. This was just the beginning. By the way, if you're finding this story as intense as I lived it, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what else I have coming. 3 days after the police station incident, I sat in my office reviewing surveillance footage from one of Gua Edwards' construction sites. My brother Byron had a friend who had a cousin who worked security, and that footage had found its way into my hands through a chain of carefully maintained deniability. What I was seeing made my blood run cold for entirely different reasons. Captain Caldwell knocked and entered without waiting. "We got a problem." "Another one." "What is it?" "Carmela just called the front desk. She's here. Says she needs to talk to you, and she won't leave." I closed the laptop. I've been avoiding my ex-wife since the hospital. Let her stew in the consequences of her choices. Let her wonder what I was planning. But maybe it was time for that conversation. I found Carmela in the lobby, and the sight of her stopped me cold. She'd lost weight in 3 days, had circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and was wearing yoga pants and a sweatshirt instead of her usual carefully curated outfit. "Lucius," her voice cracked. "Please, I need to talk to you." I gestured to a conference room, waited until we were alone. "What do you want, Carmela?" "I want my son back." Tears streamed down her face. "I want to explain, to apologize." You want? What about what Blake wants? Did you ask him?" "He won't answer my calls. Won't respond to texts. I went to your apartment, and he wouldn't even come to the door." "Yeah, that's what happens when you choose your husband over your child." "I didn't choose." She stopped, took a breath. "Okay, I did. I chose wrong. I was blind and stupid, and I failed him. But Lucius, he's my son, too. I have rights." "Rights? You nearly forfeited those when your husband put him in the hospital." I kept my voice level professional. CPS is still investigating. Emergency custody is temporary, but I'm filing for permanent modification. Blake doesn't feel safe in that house, and I'm not sending him back. What if I leave Gua? The question hung in the air. I studied my ex-wife, looking for manipulation, for strategy. Found only desperation. Have you? I'm not yet, but I'm thinking about it. The house is in both our names. The business is his, but I could. Thinking about it, I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You're thinking about leaving the man who assaulted your son? That's where we are. It's not that simple. We're married. We have assets together. I can't just walk away from 2 years of my life. Blake is 16 years of your life, and you're still hesitating. I stood. I'm going to make this simple for you, Carmela. You want to be in Blake's life? You want him to answer your calls? Then you prove you've changed. You leave Edwards. You get therapy. You spend every day earning back the trust you destroyed. But until then, until I see actual change, and not just words, you stay away from him. Because he's been through enough. You can't keep me from my son. Watch me. I walked out, left her sitting there, and felt no satisfaction in her pain. Just a bone-deep weariness at how tangled everything had become. Back in my office, I opened the laptop again. The surveillance footage showed something interesting. Gua Edwards meeting with 3 men in hard hats at a construction site on the east side. The same site where, according to permits, no construction was supposed to be happening for another 2 weeks. The same site where, according to my digging, building inspections had been mysteriously passed despite obvious code violations. My phone rang. Courtney Baldwin, my lawyer. Lucius, we have a problem. Another one. Edwards is countersuing for defamation and harassment. Claims you threatened him at the police station, that you're abusing your position to intimidate him. And he's filing an ethics complaint with the department. He's what? It gets worse. He's claiming Blake has been violent at home for months. That you've been coaching the boy to lie, and that the whole thing is a custody play on your part. He's got documentation, texts, photos, witness statements from neighbors. I felt ice settle in my gut. He's been planning this since before he hit Blake. Probably. This guy's smart, Lucius. He knew you'd come after him, so he built a defense ahead of time. We need to be very, very careful here. After she hung up, I sat in the dark of my office and realized I'd underestimated Edwards. The man wasn't just an abuser covering his tracks. He was a predator who'd been orchestrating this entire scenario. Maybe from the beginning. The question was why. That night, after Blake was asleep, I called in a favor from an old Army buddy who now worked private investigation. Within an hour, I had a preliminary background on Gua Edwards that made everything click into place. 3 previous marriages, 2 restraining orders, both sealed. A bankruptcy 7 years ago, right before he started his construction business. And a sealed juvenile record from when Edwards was 17. Juvenile records stay sealed for good reasons. But I also knew people who could unseal them. Off the books, no questions asked. It would cost me, maybe even cost me my badge if it came out. But my son was more important than my career. I made the call. The file arrived via encrypted email at 2:47 a.m. I was still awake, had been for hours, digging through public records and construction permits, trying to find a thread that would unravel Gua Edwards' carefully constructed life. What I found in that sealed juvenile file made me reach for my phone to call Carmela, then stop. Because what I was reading wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon, and I needed to think very carefully about how to use it. At 17, Gua Edwards, then Guillermo Garcia, had been arrested for assault against his stepfather. The charges were eventually dropped, the record sealed, but the police reports told a story. A teenage boy with anger management issues, a pattern of violence, allegations of stalking his stepfather's daughter from a previous marriage. The daughter had been 15 at the time. I felt sick. I looked at the closed door to Blake's room and wondered how I'd failed to see this coming. Carmela had married a predator, and I had been too busy being angry about the divorce to properly vet the man who'd be living with my son. My phone buzzed. Byron, my brother. You awake? Yeah. What's up? You need to come to the garage now. Blake's here. What? He's supposed to be asleep in his room. Well, he's not. He rode his bike here an hour ago. Won't tell me why, but he's pretty shaken up. You need to come. I checked Blake's room. Empty bed, stuffed with pillows. A classic teenager trick. I was out the door in 3 minutes, my heart pounding. What if Edwards had gotten to him? I found Blake in Byron's office, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like motor oil and old coffee. My brother stood guard at the door, arms crossed, looking worried. Blake! I knelt in front of my son. What happened? I went back to the house to get some stuff I forgot. Blake wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom wasn't there, but Gwa was. Dad, he was waiting for me. I felt my control slip. Did he touch you? No, he just talked. Said things about you, about how you're going to lose your job because of the ethics complaint, how you're abusing your authority, how the court's going to see through your manipulation and give Mom full custody. He said I'd never see you again, that I should get used to having him as a father, that you were nothing but a violent thug in uniform. He was baiting you, trying to get you to attack him. I know. That's why I left. But Dad, Blake finally looked up, and the fear in his eyes was worse than any bruise. He showed me photos of me sleeping in my room, taken through the window. He's been watching me. The world tilted. I stood, walked to the corner of the garage, and had to physically restrain myself from putting my fist through the wall. Byron put a hand on my shoulder. Lou, stay smart. Don't give him what he wants. He violated a restraining order, I said, my voice deadly calm. He threatened a minor. He's been stalking my son. And if you go over there and beat the hell out of him, you lose everything. Your badge, custody, maybe your freedom. Is that what Blake needs? I looked at my son, huddled in that blanket, trying to be brave and failing. Byron was right. This required strategy, not violence. Blake, did he give you those photos? No. He showed them on his phone. There were like 20 of them from the past week. Good. That means they're still on his phone, time-stamped and geotagged. I pulled out my own phone. I'm calling this in. Official channels. He just gave us everything we need. 2 hours later, Officer Ali and another patrolman arrived at Gwa Edwards' house with a warrant for his phone based on stalking charges filed by Lucius David on behalf of his minor son. Carmela wasn't home, working late at her sister's, according to neighbors. Edwards answered the door in pajamas, all innocent confusion, but his phone told a different story. 23 photos of Blake taken over 5 days. Locations, timestamps, angles that showed Edwards had been following the boy, watching him, building a file. And in the metadata, my investigator found something else. Photos of other teenage boys going back years. Captain David, Ollie called me aside. You need to see this. Edwards isn't just stalking Blake. We found 3 other victims in his phone. One's from his previous marriage. Another's a neighbor's kid. The third, we don't know yet, but this is a pattern. I felt vindication and horror war in my chest. Enough for an arrest. More than enough. Stalking, harassment, child endangerment. We can hold him for 72 hours while we build the case. You want to be here when we pick him up? No. I looked at Blake, asleep on Byron's office couch, exhausted from fear and adrenaline. I want to be with my son. But Ollie, make sure he knows why he's going down. Make sure he knows he should have left my family alone. The arrest happened at 7:15 a.m. while Gwa Edwards was drinking coffee and probably planning his next move against me. Carmela got the call at 7:47 from a lawyer Gwa had on retainer. By 8 o'clock, she was at my apartment, pounding on the door. Lucius, open up. What did you do? I opened the door, stepped into the hallway, so Blake wouldn't hear. I did my job. Your husband is a predator. He's been stalking Blake, photographing him, and we found evidence he's done this before. He's in custody, and if I'm right, he's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. Carmela's face crumbled. This isn't happening. This can't be. It is. And Carmela, you need to make a choice right now. You can stand by Edwards. Hire lawyers. Fight this. But you can't have Blake. She slid down the wall, sat in the hallway of my apartment building, and sobbed. I didn't know. I swear to God, Lucius, I didn't know. I believe you. But Blake doesn't, and that's what matters. I softened fractionally. You want to fix this? You start by telling the prosecutors everything. Every red flag you ignored. Every moment you chose Edwards over Blake. You give them ammunition to put him away for good. That's how you start earning your son back. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. And I felt no satisfaction just a grim determination to see this through. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. Men like Edwards had contingency plans, had resources, had lawyers who knew how to muddy water and create reasonable doubt. The arrest was just the beginning. The real war was about to start. Guy Edwards made bail in 48 hours. His lawyer, a slick operator named Tanner Mata, who specialized in defending the indefensible, argued that the photos were innocent, that Edwards was concerned about his stepson's whereabouts, that the metadata was circumstantial. The judge, a tired woman 3 weeks from retirement, set bail at $50,000 and released him with an ankle monitor and a restraining order. I got the call from the prosecutor, a bulldog named Julia Walsh, who'd put away more predators than anyone in the city. "I'm sorry, Lucius. I pushed for a no-bail remand, but Mata's good. He made Edwards look like a concerned parent. He'll run. His passport's flagged. You got a monitor, and we're building the case. The other victims are willing to testify. That'll take months, maybe years. In the meantime, he's out there, and he knows I'm coming for him." "Lucius," Julia's voice held a warning. "Do not do anything stupid. We have him. Let the system work." But I had spent 23 years watching the system work, and I knew its flaws intimately. I knew how evidence got suppressed, how victims got intimidated, how men with money and good lawyers walked free while good people suffered. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not to Blake. Captain Caldwell appeared in my office doorway. "We have a situation. Anonymous tip came in about Edwards' construction sites. Claims he's been using undocumented workers, ignoring safety codes, paying off inspectors. Could be nothing." Or Caldwell finished. "It could be exactly what we need." I grabbed my jacket. "Give me a warrant for his business records. Everything. Payroll, permits, inspection reports. I want to bury him under so many charges. He never sees daylight again." "Lou, man, you need to be careful. His lawyer's already crying harassment. IA is watching you. Then they can watch me do my job." I headed for the door, then stopped. "Arnaldo, you've been my partner for 15 years. You don't have to follow me on this. If it goes bad, I don't want you caught in the fallout." Caldwell stood, grabbed his own jacket. "That kid of yours used to bring his science projects to the precinct. Show me how to build a volcano when he was 8. You think I'm going to let some predator walk free? I'm with you. Wherever this goes." The warrant came through by noon. By 2 p.m., I had a team of officers at Edwards' main construction site, the luxury condo development, on the east side that had been fast-tracked through every permit process, every inspection, every bureaucratic hurdle. What they found was worse than I had hoped for. Structurally unsound foundations, electrical work that violated a dozen safety codes, materials that didn't match the building plans. And in the site office, a set of books that showed Edwards had been cooking numbers for years, overbilling clients, underpaying workers, skimming materials, and pocketing the difference. "Captain David," one of the officers called from the basement level. "You need to see this." I climbed down into the foundation area, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The officer pointed to a section of wall where concrete had been poured but hadn't yet set properly. "Look at the rebar placement. It's all wrong. This whole building could collapse in a moderate earthquake." And according to the inspection reports, this passed structural review 3 weeks ago. I photographed everything, called in a city building inspector who wasn't on Edwards' payroll, and by 4 p.m. had enough evidence to shut down every project Edwards had in progress. Financial fraud, reckless endangerment, bribery of public officials. The charges would multiply like bacteria in a petri dish. But it still wasn't enough. Because Edwards had contingency plans, offshore accounts, properties in his mother's name. He could walk away from the business, declare bankruptcy, and disappear into a comfortable life somewhere warm, while Blake lived with nightmares. I needed something bigger, something permanent. That night, I met with my brother Byron and Courtney Baldwin, my lawyer, in Byron's garage. Blake was at a friend's house, a carefully supervised visit I'd arranged to give the kids some normalcy. "Okay." Courtney spread files across Byron's desk. "Here's where we stand legally. The stalking charges are solid. The construction fraud is building. But Mata is good, and Edwards has money. He could drag this out for years, And there's always the chance he beats some charges, plea bargains on others, serves minimal time. That's not acceptable, I said flatly. Then we need to think outside the law. Byron leaned back in his chair. I'm not saying we do anything illegal, he clarified. I'm saying we need to get creative. What do you have in mind? Byron grinned, and I was reminded that my younger brother hadn't always made his living fixing cars. Before he'd gone straight, Byron had run with a rougher crowd, had connections that spanned the gray areas between legal and criminal. Edwards has enemies. Lots of them. Contractors he undercut, workers he screwed over, clients he defrauded. What if some of those enemies decided to come forward? What if the press got interested in the story? A predator contractor who stalked his stepson while building death traps that could collapse on families. Media pressure, Courtney said slowly. Public outcry. Make it politically impossible for any DA to offer a plea deal. And more than that, Byron pulled something up on his laptop. Edwards owns 3 properties outright. One's the house where he lives with Carmela. The other 2 are rental properties that generate his cash flow. What if those properties suddenly had very expensive problems? Plumbing disasters, electrical fires, foundation issues that require immediate and costly repairs. That's destruction of property, I said. Is it? Or is it just the natural consequence of shoddy construction finally catching up with him? You've seen his work. Those properties are probably already disasters waiting to happen. What if someone just accelerated the timeline? I looked at my brother, at the lawyer who was carefully not expressing an opinion, and felt the weight of the choice in front of me. I could play by the rules, trust the system, hope that justice prevailed. Or I could fight fire with fire, use Edwards' own weapons against him. How soon can you make it happen? Give me a week. And Lou, once we start this, we can't stop. Edwards will know it's us. He'll fight back. This could get ugly. It's already ugly. Let's finish it. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning when the city's largest newspaper ran a front-page story. Contractor faces stalking, fraud charges. Are your homes safe? The article detailed Edwards' arrest, the photos of Blake, and crucially, included interviews with 3 former employees who described systematic safety violations, financial fraud, and a pattern of intimidation. By noon, Edwards' phone was ringing off the hook. Clients demanding refunds, investors pulling funding, city councilors calling for investigations. His carefully constructed empire was shaking. The second domino fell that night when a pipe burst in his primary rental property, a 6-unit building that housed 2 families with young children. The water damage was catastrophic, requiring immediate evacuation and tens of thousands in repairs. The building inspector who showed up found so many code violations that he red-tagged the entire structure. I watched from across the street as tenants carried their belongings out in garbage bags, their faces exhausted and angry. I felt a flicker of guilt for their displacement, but Byron had already arranged for them to be contacted by a tenants' rights lawyer who would help them sue Edwards for uninhabitable conditions. They'd end up better off. The third domino was Carmela. 3 days after the newspaper article, she filed for divorce and moved into her sister's house. She called me that night, her voice small and broken. I gave the prosecutor everything, every document I could find, every conversation I remembered. Julia Walsh says it's enough to add financial fraud to the stalking charges. That must have been hard. Not as hard as facing Blake and knowing I chose that monster over my own son. She paused. Can I see him? Just for coffee. I know I don't deserve it, but I'll ask him. No promises. Blake agreed reluctantly, and I drove him to a coffee shop where Carmela waited, looking fragile and older than her years. I stayed within sight, but out of earshot, letting them talk, watching my son's body language shift from defensive to guardedly open over the course of an hour. When they were done, Blake walked back to the car with red-rimmed eyes, but looser shoulders. She apologized, really apologized, said she was wrong, that she chose badly, that she understands if I never forgive her. Do you want to forgive her? I don't know. Maybe eventually. But Dad, she gave the prosecutor everything. She's helping Takewood down. I know. Is that enough? To make up for it, I pull my son into a hug. That's not for me to decide, champ, but it's a start. The fourth domino fell when one of Edwards' previous victims, a boy now 23, married with a child of his own, saw the newspaper article and came forward. His testimony was devastating. 3 years of stalking when he was 15, escalating from photographs to following him to showing up at his school to explicit messages. The charges had been sealed in a plea deal, but now he was willing to testify publicly. 2 more victims followed. The case was no longer just about Blake. It was about a pattern of predatory behavior spanning a decade. Tanner Mata, Edwards' lawyer, tried to suppress the testimony, tried to argue prejudice, character assassination, irrelevance. But Julia Walsh was relentless, and the judge, newly motivated by public pressure and media scrutiny, denied every motion. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out. Edwards would stand trial for stalking, fraud, child endangerment, and a dozen related charges. If convicted on all counts, he was looking at 15 to 20 years. But I knew convicted men still had appeals, still had lawyers, still had ways to fight back. I needed Edwards not just in prison, but destroyed, so thoroughly ruined that he'd never threaten Blake again. That's when Byron called with the final piece. "Lou, you need to hear this. I have a friend who worked on Edwards' construction crew 5 years ago. He's willing to testify that Edwards intentionally cut corners on a residential build in 2020. The foundation was never properly reinforced, and Edwards knew it. The family that bought that house, their 10-year-old daughter was injured when part of the deck collapsed last year. Does the family know Edwards was responsible? Not yet, but they could if someone pointed them in the right direction. I felt the trap closing. Give me the family's contact information. And Byron, thank you. He's our kid, our family. I'd burn the world down for you two." Byron's voice was fierce. "Now go finish this." The trial of Gwa Edwards began on a cold Monday in November. The courtroom was packed. Media, victims, former employees, and every cop in the city who had a grudge against predators who abused their position. I sat in the front row, Blake on one side, Carmela on the other, a united front despite all the history between us. Julia Walsh's opening statement was surgical. She outlined the pattern of stalking, the photos of Blake, the testimony from previous victims. She detailed the construction fraud, the building code violations, the bribery. And then she played her final card, the family of the injured girl, suing Edwards in civil court and willing to testify about the collapsed deck, the negligent construction, the permanent injury their daughter sustained. Tanner Mata tried to counter, painting Edwards as a misunderstood businessman, a concerned stepfather, a victim of a vengeful ex-husband with a badge. But his voice lacked conviction, and the jury, 8 women for men, mostly middle-aged, mostly parents, stared at Edwards with undisguised contempt. The prosecution's case took 3 days. Victim after victim testified to Edwards' stalking, his manipulation, his predatory behavior. Construction workers detailed the fraud, the corner-cutting, the intimidation. Building inspectors admitted to taking bribes. The father of the injured girl broke down on the stand, describing his daughter's months of physical therapy, the surgeries, the trauma. Through it all, Edwards sat impassive, his expensive suit and calm demeanor a mask over whatever darkness lived beneath. But I saw the cracks. The way his hand shook when the photos of Blake were displayed, the tightness around his eyes when former employees detailed his cruelty, the moment of pure rage when Carmela took the stand and methodically destroyed his character. On the 4th day, Tanner Mata called Edwards to testify in his own defense. It was a gamble, and I knew why. Edwards was charismatic, articulate, and Mata was hoping he could charm the jury. But Julia Walsh was waiting. She let Edwards tell his story. The concerned stepfather, the misunderstood businessman, the victim of a vindictive ex-husband. She let him paint himself as a sympathetic, reasonable human. And then she went for the throat. "Mr. Edwards, you claim these photos of Blake David were taken out of concern for his safety. Is that correct?" "Yes. He was sneaking out at night, hanging around dangerous areas." These dangerous areas, Julia pulled up a map on the courtroom screen. "Could you identify them?" Edwards pointed to various locations. The coffee shop near his father's apartment, the library, his uncle's garage. "These don't seem particularly dangerous to me, Mr. Edwards. Would you characterize a library as a dangerous area? It's not about the location. It's about who he was meeting. Who was he meeting? I don't know. That's why I was monitoring him. So, you were monitoring a minor child, not your biological son, without his knowledge or consent, because you were concerned about hypothetical meetings with hypothetical people in public locations like libraries and coffee shops? The jury shifted. Edwards's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Julia continued, Mr. Edwards, let's talk about your previous marriages. How many times have you been married? 3 times, including Carmela. And in your previous 2 marriages, did you have stepchildren? Edwards's eyes narrowed. Yes, both teenage boys. And both relationships ended with restraining orders filed against you. Is that correct? Those were misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. Like the photos of Blake were misunderstandings. Like the building code violations were misunderstandings. Like the collapsed deck that injured a 10-year-old girl was a misunderstanding. Julia's voice rose. Mr. Edwards, how many misunderstandings does it take before we recognize a pattern of dangerous, predatory behavior? Tanner Mata was on his feet, objecting loudly. But the jury had already made up their minds. I could see it in their faces, the disgust, the anger, the determination to protect their own children from men like Edwards. The defense rested the next day, their case in tatters. Closing arguments were brief. Julia Walsh, methodical and devastating. Tanner Mata, desperate and unconvincing. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous on all 23 counts. Guilty. Edwards's face went white. He turned to look at me, and in that moment, I saw everything. The rage, the hatred, the unspoken promise of revenge. But it was hollow, because Edwards was going to prison for 15 to 20 years minimum. And by the time he got out, Blake would be in his 30s, established and safe, and I would still be waiting. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. I walked out of the courtroom with Blake and Carmela, feeling the weight of months of tension finally lifting. Outside, media swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Captain David, how do you feel about the verdict? I feel like justice was served, and I hope this sends a message to